I found myself in the castle library, not just searching for ancient secrets but also discovering a romantic connection with Caspian. Our budding love, however, is entwined with duties and destinies that go beyond our heart's desires. Let's officially listen to today's werewolf story. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for your support. Chapter 19. This is a hell of a first date. Caspian's dark eyes sparkled with amusement as he gazed at me over his dusty tongue. I glanced down at my own ancient text, suppressing a smile. This passage is so romantic. The Vampiric Council of 1885 does hereby decree that familiars shall be surveyed and names placed in the official record twice annually. Caspian smirked, his intelligent features lighting up. So sexy. I waggled my eyebrows, my bookish nature reveling in the shared joke. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. We were ensconced in the castle library, elbow-deep in ancient scrolls and huge, leather-bound books. As much as I loved literature, these were all dry as toast, and we hadn't found anything of note in the last hour. The musty smell of old parchment filled the air, reminding me of the supernatural world I was now part of. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. The mating games, an interesting tradition, Caspian said, his tone casual but his eyes betraying his curiosity. I pushed my book aside and examined his face, noting the slight tension in his expression. My cautious nature kicked in, prompting me to choose my words carefully. Indeed, my answer was curt, intended to make him ask what he wanted to know and, hopefully, reveal something about himself in the process. Were you looking forward to participating? To be honest, no. He seemed surprised at this, his eyebrows rising slightly. I thought you might have been. I quirked up an eyebrow, my wit coming to the fore. What gave you that impression? Oh, I don't know. Maybe it was your love for dresses and your compliant demeanor. Mischief dancing in the depths of his dark eyes. I have to laugh, appreciating his sense of humor. Yet you got me pegged. Caspian pretended to go back to reading, but I sensed he hadn't gotten to the heart of what he really wanted to know. His slightly mischievous nature seemed to be warring with genuine interest. Were you interested in any of the male shifters who were supposed to be here? Without making eye contact. So this was what he was wondering about. Interesting. I tucked a lock of hair behind my ear as I considered how truthful my answer should be. In the end, my honest nature won out, and I found I wanted to trust him. I was not. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I didn't really know any of them. I've heard of a few of them and their packs, that they live on the other side of the country. This might sound foolish to someone like you, but I always thought I would mate for love. It might have sounded foolish before this started, but now, he let the words hang and regarded me with a serious expression that made my breath catch. We went back to reading for a few more minutes, an awkward feeling in the air. The tension between us was palpable, a mix of attraction and certainty. This seems like barking up the wrong tree. Caspian shut the book and stretched, looking as if he wanted to brush away his previous words. I shot him a glance, my wit coming to my rescue. Barking? Was that a werewolf joke? He raised a dark eyebrow, his intelligent eyes twinkling. I don't know. Did you like it? Unable to help myself. Definitely not. Then, no, his mouth quirked up. Despite completely failing at our task and the ache of my wound, I was having a good time. Caspian was nice to talk to and seemed genuinely interested in me. His intelligence and curiosity matched my own, creating a comfortable rapport between us, and he wasn't half bad on the eyes. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It was like winning the mate lottery, though I cautioned myself not to get too carried away. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. We were still in the midst of these mysterious mating games, and there was much I didn't know about this intriguing vampire. He'd been stealing glances while he was reading, wondering why the way his dark hair fell over his eyes gave him a boyish vulnerability. His lips moved when he read, and he had a habit of stretching out his big shoulders occasionally, reminding me of his sculpted body beneath those clothes. I told myself that libraries weren't sexy, and this was to date. Not really. Nevertheless, it was the most fun it had in a while. I was enjoying his company despite my efforts not to. Who would have thought Caspian was fun to be with? But there was one thing still on my mind. Do vampires have the ability to, I don't know what to call it, enthrall someone? Make them desire them? You know, like in the movies. My eyes on the book in front of me like it was the most important text I'd ever seen. It seemed like the right time to ask. Why, I shrugged. His hand reached out and touched mine. Do you think, all this time, that I've been making you hot for me? I raised my eyes. Who says I'm hot for you? He laughed, and it eased the tension in my shoulders. No, Elise, I have not been enthralling you. Is it possible? Yes, but your mind is strong. It probably wouldn't work on you. To my agent extraordinaire, Webnovel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It's more a vampires against humans thing. Then he raised an eyebrow. And you're not hot for me. I dropped my eyes to the book. Wow, this text is so interesting. His voice sending shivers up my spine. One more question. To my agent extraordinaire, Webnovel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Since we were airing all our dirty laundry tonight, yes, this one was harder to force out. Did my family pay your family to include me in this? Is that why I'm here? Disbelief covered his features. I forgot you'd asked me that before. Where in the world would you get that idea? I think I pissed him off while I kneed him in the junk. Caspian ground his teeth. One hand gripped the table so hard I was afraid he'd break it in half. I touched him lightly. I took care of it. No need to put his head on a pike. Maybe he'd like to do that for fun. But he seemed to be calming down. No, Elise. No one paid to have you included in the games or keep you here. Your name was top on our list. I nodded, feeling the flush of embarrassment color my cheeks. At least I had those questions answered. Now to the more pressing ones. Name me, what the hell was this prophecy about? I turned back to the book in front of me, but it was hard to focus with Caspian Nightshade sitting across the table. Look at this. Turning the new book, HUD picked up towards me. My eyes scanned the handwritten scrawl. Someone had taken to this parchment with quill and ink long ago. I hope to the moon the reddish you didn't mean this was written in red water. What am I looking at? To my agent extraordinaire, Webnovel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Skimming the word. To my agent extraordinaire, Webnovel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He pointed to the middle of the page. The indeed and cursed will have their season, but as the seasons change, their lineage will not multiply and be fruitful unless they find the dark match. The indeed and cursed. Glancing up from the book, we vampires are the indeed. To my agent extraordinaire, Webnovel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. And many think shifters were once humans cursed to live double lives. And he writ talks about will not multiply and be fruitful. Isn't that what you were saying? No young are being born. Very few. Yes, unless they find the dark match. What does that mean? Caspian met my gaze. I shook my head. I've not heard of the dark match. He rubbed a hand along his chin thoughtfully. I feel like I have. Somewhere. Before he could say more, the door behind us creaked open. Startled, we both jumped to our feet before anyone could enter the room. Caspian moved protectively in front of me. William strode in and stopped at the entrance. His eyes on us. What is this? What are you doing? Caspian frowned. Elise and I are on our date. In a dusty room. In the dark. No cameras. William stared at us disapprovingly. His eye twitched, betraying his emotions behind the mask of calm he was projecting. I had a feeling he could be very vengeful when he wanted to be. I asked Caspian to bring me here. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Slowly closing the book we'd been reading and slipping around Caspian's massive frame. I miss my books back home, and Caspian agreed to let me come here to pick some out. There's nothing to read in our rooms. William gave me a disapproving glare before turning on Caspian. I need to speak to you now. His tone left no room for negotiation. But Caspian lied anyway. I'm on my date now. William had a death grip on a pair of gloves he was slowly strangling. I had no doubt if Caspian didn't comply, there would be consequences. I'm tired. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Giving a fake yawn. Are you sure? Caspian asked. I can look for a book another time. He gave me a knowing glance. Yes, we can. Turning to William, Caspian asked, can I at least walk her to her room? There are guards for that. He snapped back. Come with me now. William turned and strode out of the room, his hard heels clicking on the tile. I'm sorry, Caspian said, his jaw ticking. I have to go. I understand. His gaze lingered on my face. I want to see you. Soon. You know where I am. He leaned in and planted a chaste kiss on my lips. Though it was brief, it still made my heart flutter and my knees weaken. To my bewilderment, the feeling lingered long after H.E.D. gone. Two vampire guards waited at the library door, the same silent sentinels that were always lingering around. Once Caspian parted, they walked me back to my room, leaving me to my thoughts, which were, once again, a jumbled mess. Dark match. Attack. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. There was so much I didn't know. It seemed that every time I went digging for answers, all I found were more questions. It didn't help that my emotions were a giant clump of thick taffy that gummed up the works on everything else. I decided that instead of going to my room, I would go for a walk. The guards didn't put up a fuss, nor seem to care where I went as long as I wasn't causing trouble. I kept walking, making random turns down the tile floors. The guards and step behind me. Dark match. Attack. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Hot kiss. Caspian's body, his hands on mine. Yearning, wanting, needing, lost in my thoughts. It took until I was practically at the entrance of the women's sitting room before I heard the fight. Someone was yelling. I could hear it through the closed doors. Muffled voices, some shouts, and was someone crying. Without waiting to ask the guards, I turned and pulled open the door. The remaining female contestants were circled around to figures in the center of the room. One was standing and one was sitting. From their postures, it was clear that the person in the chair was under attack. Blonde hair swung as the standing woman started up again. If you think I won't do something about your betrayal, Willow, you don't know me and my family very well. Isolde, I should have known. I don't know what you want me to do. Willow shrunk slowly in the chair, looking as if she wished could melt into it. Isolde took a step toward her, looking like she might strike her. I stormed in, my voice preceding me. Every head turned in my direction. Isolde's eyes widened and then narrowed. Youth, that's right, me. Step away from Willow or I will make you. Isolde turned toward me, her hands forming into fists. Quietly, Larbe and Nanette slid behind her. Everyone else watched with rapt attention. Your lapdogs don't scare me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. jutting my chin toward them. You don't? To my agent extraordinaire, Marilyn Nobel. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Isolde cocked her head as a smirk stood up her makeup-covered face. You would do well to be scared. Little wolf, I know a secret about you and your family. My red water ran cold. Keep my family out of this. Her vile smile spread wider. Your poor grandfather, our beloved Edric Alpha. It'll be so sad when he dies. And, from what I hear, that could be any time now. And then the Thorns will have their day. There's no one good enough to take that alpha necklace. The old ways are dead. Shut up. For a very long time, there had been an Edric Alpha to rule the Western Pax and keep the peace. Before that, Pax had constantly fought for control, nearly exterminating our kind. The alpha necklace had been our salvation, and it wielded the conciliatory force. Did Isolde really want us to go back to murdering each other? What was worse, she was strong about the Thorns having their day. My father did not want to become Edric Alpha, and me, I was too young. But my grandfather was supposed to live for a long time still. He couldn't die. Would not. Rage burned hot and bright behind my eyes. I wanted to tear her throat out. I wanted to rip out her hair and hang her with it. I took a step towards her, my limbs shaking with the desire to shred her to pieces. Elise, Willow said, getting up. Don't. She's trying to make you lose it. She wants you to get kicked out. She was talking about it before you got here. Seething, I turned my gaze to Willow. Her brown doe eyes pleaded with me. She was right. Tearing Isolde apart might feel good at the moment, but it wouldn't get me any closer to seeing my grandfather again, and it could make William decide I was too much trouble. If I was kicked out of the game, I could see my family, but then Isolde would solidify her position and possibly take Caspian from me, like he was mine to own. I had no idea where that possessive feeling had come from, but I didn't have time to contemplate that. I had to focus on Isolde and the fact that I cowed and let her win. Taking deep breaths, I relaxed my fists and met Isolde's smug gaze with a bone, chilling glare of my own. Get out of this room now while you are still able. Isolde laughed. So hostile. I was just trying to be helpful. Oh well, we all know the Raven Moons are losing it. Come on, girls. She nodded towards the door. Nanette and Larbe followed. Once they were gone, the other girls started to filter out too. The show was over, so they lost interest. Willow, alone, sat where she was until the rest of them were gone. Oh, Elise, what are we going to do? Staring at a closed doorway. Sure, I've forgiven her for the betrayal, but I was sure we were a we. What was Isolde saying to you? She was telling me that if I didn't join her side, she was going to make sure my entire pack paid for it. We don't have the power that your pack does. If the Thorns come for us, we don't stand a chance. Isolde was low, threatening Willow, and likely the other girls with displacement and ostracization, was despicable, and most packs were not strong enough to fight them if it came down to that. The Thorns seemed to be making a major push to control the entire region. They want a member of their pack to be Edric Alpha, Willow said. I suspected as much. Which meant Isolde Essilk would come after my pack since the Raven Moons controlled our territory. Was what she said about your grandfather true? She blinked up at me. Is he dying? I bit my cheek. No, of course not. My grandfather is as strong as the tides. Oh, good. But her tone made me wonder if she truly believed me. Oh, moons. I needed to get home. Willow pushed to the edge of the chair. There's going to be another game tomorrow. Did you hear? Huh. I turned toward Willow. What kind of game? I don't know. They didn't tell us, but they said it's something big, with a big prize for the winner, and a kick out the door for the loser. Willow shrugged. Part of me wants to get kicked out. I want to go home. I put a hand on her arm, feeling like part of me was being tugged into directions until I was coming apart at the seams. Don't we all? Don't we all? Chapter 20. What do you think it will be this time? Will whispered. leaning close to me. She fidgeted with the containment cuff on her wrist, our constant reminder that we were prisoners here, rats in their maze. But we had to play. I glanced out at the athletic field, lit once again by hanging lanterns. The grass looked silver in the cloud-covered moonlight. An owl hooted, only adding to the eerie feeling tumbling around in my stomach. What was the game this time? Well, there were metal spheres the size of kickballs down at one end, but nothing else to indicate what the game might be. There was no treacherous obstacle course, no barrels, nothing to give me a clear idea and help set my nerves at ease. I don't know, I answered, giving a shrug and trying to lighten the mood. Juggling. Widow snorted and wrapped her arms around her slender frame. At least that is something I might be good at. Anything else? And I'm sure to be sent home. We'd been given word that more girls were to be eliminated after today's trials. It seemed the Vouts only wanted strong mates, and some of the girls weren't proving their worth. It made the silly assumption that each of the 7 remaining girls would be matched with a mate, but it seemed William and the game makers had other ideas. Had the Vout suitors found our selection of females wanting? Or was William Power moved to make sure Caspian was the only one who ended up with someone? Or maybe we were only being told half the story. Vampire politics hurt my head. It didn't matter. I had to win and stay in the game. Otherwise, what was any of this for? And the idea of Isolde getting her hands on Caspian made me livid with anger. How strange to go from hating someone to wishing you could be with that person every waking moment. Had I lost my mind? Probably. Was it Stockholm Syndrome? Likely. Was Caspian charming, witty, and a delight to be with? Absolutely. They didn't call him Mr. Eligible bachelor for nothing. Isolde cowled and have him. It already decided that in my bones. As if it summoned her with my thought, she and her hench wolves strolled onto the field and surveyed the scene. Isolde never went anywhere now without Neville Larbe at her side. They'd struck some sort of deal with her, which I was sure Isolde would break as soon as it suited her. Still, it made her dangerous. Fighting one wolf was easy. Fighting 3 not so good. I glanced back, noting that Sylvia and Justice, a shifter I hadn't really talked to much, were heading in our direction. 7 of us remained in Afterday. There would be only 4. The stakes had never been higher. I had a hard time meeting their eyes since I knew I would be vying for the same spots they were. What now? Sylvia asked. She was dressed in turquoise athletic gear that showed off her toned physique, and her curly hair was pulled back into a stylish top knot. If I had to bet on who would still be around after this challenge, Sylvia would be on my list. Her caramel-colored eyes surveyed the field, and she frowned. Do you think we'll be able to shift? I hope so, said Justice. She was wearing blue shorts and a floral tank top. More model, thin and muscular. She glanced between Sylvia and me as if we had answers. Otherwise, how can they see what we can do? I have a feeling they get uncomfortable with us in our wolf forms. Sylvia whispered. I've heard the maids telling jokes about dogs under their breath. They're okay with us in our human form. But Wolf, she shook her head. Was that true? Did Caspian not like me in my wolf form? It was another wrinkle. One I didn't have time to consider because the vampires were coming out. Enthusiasm, 8 of them marched out of the castle, and the cameras swung from us to the procession. William walked in the front, followed by Caspian. Behind him walked Callan, head held high, son of a bitch. H.E.S. still here. Even after he cut me. My eyes locked on him. Achidi called me a dog too, not to mention the fact that Achidi tried to kill Caspian. And yet, here he was. Caspian had been right. There was some reason William was allowing this. Another power play from the man that pulled all the strings. William took his spot in the center of the large field, and the 7 vampire suitors lined up behind him. The cameras, which were already in their silent corners before we'd arrived, trained their lenses on the elder vampire. Once he knew he had our attention, and the attention of everyone viewing at home, he began to speak. Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, and the folks at home. Thank you, once again, for joining us. As you know, tonight is very special. Tonight we will be saying goodbye to 4 of our contestants, and hello to our 3 finalists. The contestants were leaving. That was more than we counted on. A murmur went up from the girls behind me, but William's voice blotted them out. Yes, we are nearing the end of the mating games. Soon, you will be matched with your partner and you can start your new lives together. Wow, it sounded creepy when he said it that way. Like we'd soon be married off to vampires. Transacted off like cattle. Once again, I wondered what kind of choice would be offered. Yes, they said we would be able to choose if we wanted our vampire partners. But I had a feeling personal choice was not high on William's priority list. Why did I have a feeling all matches between shifter and vampire were being orchestrated by the man in front of me? But you have one more physical challenge to conquer before that can occur. William continued. This one will test your mental strength as much as your physical strength. I listened carefully, trying to suss out what he meant. Some sort of scavenger hunt. William began walking toward the far end of the field where the metal balls sat. We watched intently as he picked one up. It's a harmless ball right now. He set it down and waved over his shoulder. From behind him, a vampire servant appeared with a cart, a large metal can on top. Smoke billowed out of the can, saturating the air with its acrid scent. We watched as the servant unscrewed the tops of the metal medicine balls and began to shovel hot coals into each ball. William smiled, a sick pleasure on his face. When they were done and the last ball had been sealed, William reached down and picked the ball up again. Immediately, his hands began to burn, adding the smell of burning flesh to the acrid stink in the air. Some of the girls behind me gasped. William grimaced as his hands blistered. He set the ball on a pile of rocks on the ground. Slowly, he held out his hands, smirking as his skin repaired itself. Finally, he clapped his hands together and let out a chuckle, so William could still heal. Maybe it was because he was older and more powerful. Another detail I filed away for later. I was too engrossed in this insane challenge, judging by every owner's somber faces. No one thought this challenge was cute or funny like William did. No, it was insane. You want us to burn our hands off? Nanette asked. William played innocent. No permanent harm will come to you. You'll be able to shift and heal yourself when you get the ball to the finish line. He pointed to the far end of the field. No harm, no foul. We stared in horror at what he was asking us to do. He wanted us to carry a heavy metal ball across the yard, about half a football field in length, while it burned off our skin. On top of that, we could only shift and heal once we were done. We won't have any hands left to heal. Sylvia protested. A chorus of agreement went up behind her. William shrugged. We are looking for females who are willing to do whatever it takes to win. If that does not describe you, please, step back. He pointed to the line behind us, as the girls glanced back and forth, each considering if this was something they were willing to do. Caspian stepped forward. This is madness. We need to call this off. William glanced at the cameras and waved him away. No, Caspian shot back, his fangs eliminating as his eyes darkened. You can task them to do this. The pain alone will be akin to what we felt when we were turned into vampires. William's face was stony. He would not be swayed, especially not in front of all the people at home. Caspian turned to us. Don't do this. His eyes found mine, and he shook his head. You don't have to do what he says. I stared from him to the sizzling metal balls. The pain would be nearly unbearable, and could I heal from an injury so severe? Other girls were stepping back. Sylvia was the first, then Justice. L'Abbé was hedging that way, but Isolde grabbed her arm. You're staying, she growled with clenched teeth. I glanced at Willow, who shook her head sadly and walked to the line. I didn't blame her. I was seriously considering doing the same thing. How could I help my family if I permanently damaged my hands? Wait, William said, a devious twinkle in his eye. Don't you want to hear the prize? Another dumb date. Sylvia shot back. She crossed her arms over her chest and gave him a disapproving shake of her head. William smirked. Far from it. The winner of this game gets to leave the grounds and visit their family without being eliminated. His eyes landed right on me. Oh shit. He knew what I wanted. He had to. The prize he was offering was the exact thing I needed, and he was dangling it in front of me like a treat to a starving pooch. I looked at the sizzling metal balls, then at my hands. Elise. Caspian took a step forward, but William held him back with a hand on his chest. The look he gave Caspian held decades of manipulation inside it. I could tell. Caspian stared at me with pleading eyes, but I couldn't back down. Not with every coven and pack watching. Not with such a prize on the line. How would my sick grandfather feel if I had the chance to see him and I said no thanks? How could I look my family in the eyes if he died? And I never made it home. Stiffly, I walked to where the metal balls were throwing off heat and charring the stones beneath them. Several were now glowing red hot at the bottom. They had twisted in my gut, but I didn't let it show on my face. Isolde walked over and stood beside me. If she was afraid, she was letting it show either. The same could not be said for L'Abbé or Nanette, the only others who didn't back out. They appeared terrified. It seemed Isolde was not the kind to suffer alone and had managed to intimidate them into participating. Excellent, William said. We have the very brave ladies. Agreeing to the task makes it clear you are the type of individual we need going forward, but the one who actually completes it will be the real prize. What are the rules? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Wanting to get this over with and dreading what came next all at the same time. You must carry the ball to the end of the field and cross the finish line. You cannot kick the ball. You cannot roll the ball. You must carry the ball the entire time. L'Arbre's shoulders slumped. It seemed she'd been planning on using one of those techniques. No one can help you carry the ball. You must do it on your own. You cannot shift until the ball is successfully past the goal. No healing in between. They'd really thought of everything, hadn't they? William was a sadistic bastard. The first one to cross following these rules wins. Are you ready? No, I definitely was not. But delaying the pain would not make it any less. I stared at the ball, trying to figure out if there was any way to avoid it searing off my skin. All right. On your mark. Get set. Go. A blast sounded. I reached for my ball. The searing hot metal burned against my flesh as I lifted it and started running. The pain was torture. My burning skin screamed at me to drop the ball, but it only made it a few feet. I gritted my teeth and kept running while, behind me, someone cried out in anguish. The pain grew and grew. Agony throbbed from my hands up my arms, blotting out all thought. My skin was blistering. I could feel it. Both hands felt like they were on fire. I panted and stumbled over the grass until I couldn't take it anymore. I dropped the ball, lifted my hands up, and stared in horror at the damage. The flesh had bubbled and blistered. Several angry red welts had popped and were oozing. Oh gods. I moaned, staring at my ruined hands. I wasn't even halfway, and I was ready to faint. Which I might have if Caspian hadn't appeared on the sidelines. Isolde is coming. She's the one screaming behind you. If you stand there much longer, she will overtake you. I know you want to see your grandfather. This is your chance. I blinked, trying to focus on what Caspian was saying. Isolde was coming. If I wanted to win, I had to pick up the ball. Take off your jacket and wrap it around your hands. He didn't say anything about that in the rules. He pointed at the zip-up I was wearing. It seemed my desire to cover myself might finally pay off. If only I had thought of it sooner. Hurry, Caspian pleaded, glancing back at Isolde, my hands screaming in pain. I fumbled with stiff, blistered fingers to unzip my jacket and pull it off. Every movement was agony, but I finally got it off. Good, Caspian said. Now find the part of the ball that was at the top. It should be cooler. You'll want to grip it there. Through the pain. I heard him. He was helping me win. And it was working. I used the back of my throbbing hand to find the part on the ball that had been at the top. It was, indeed, cooler than the part where the coals had pooled. But my hands were a mess. I could barely wrap the jacket around them, let alone use them to pick up the ball. Tears streamed down my face as the pain and anguish threatened to take me under. So much pain. Isolde, screaming as she went, stumbled past me, still holding her ball. She was going to win. I couldn't let that happen. Not now. Not after I'd come this far. I thought of my mom, my dad, my pack. I thought of my grandfather. If he was dying, I had to see him. One last time, gritting my teeth as the tears slid down my face. I forced my ruined hands to lift the ball. A cry that I barely recognized emanated from my throat as my hands began to pulse with agony once more. Then I took off running. I didn't stop when the pain took hold of every sense. I didn't stop when the ball began to sear my chest and burn through the fabric on my hands and arms. I didn't stop when the jacket around my hands caught fire. I just kept running. I barely noticed when I crossed the finish line. But Caspian did. He was there, ripping the ball from my hands and pulling the flaming jacket off me, shaking my shoulders to get my attention. Please, Elise. Oh yes. I could shift, using the last bit of consciousness I possessed. I found my wolf form. I felt her take hold of me, and then I knew no more. Chapter 21. I stared out the tinted window of the idling limo, my eyes on the castle. The grey stone had turned pinkish in the twilight. Flags snapped on the ramparts as the night descended around us. How long had it been since I'd sat in a car similar to this with my family? A week. Yes, almost exactly a week, yet it seemed like a month or more. But today I'd get to go home, if only for a few hours. I'd get to see them again. The limo seats were comfortable and the air from the vent was cool, but that didn't quell the throb coming from my hands. They were tucked into my lap like injured birds. I unfolded one, then the other, 5 fingers each, raw pinkish skin on both palms. They worked to hold and grasp things, but they didn't feel right. My shifter form had healed my destroyed hands. I'd been unconscious through most of it, waking only to howl with the pain that threatened to consume me. I'd only been able to stay conscious for a few moments, which I counted as a blessing, but each time I came to, Caspian was there. Achilles sat beside me as I shuddered and thrashed, fighting the agony that wanted to take me under. Achilles stroked my fur and whispered with kindness. If I ever suspected that he hated my wolf form, all those doubts disappeared after those moments. That had been a day ago and my hands were healed. Or so they said. As I stared down at them, I wondered if they would ever be the same. There was little left of what I'd call hands when the game had finished. So what I saw before me wasn't really me. It had calluses and a few scars, but they were gone now. Could I even call these new things mine? I guessed with time I would, but I couldn't ruminate on trivial things like that when I had much bigger fish to fry. I was about to go home, the thing I'd wanted ever since arriving at this castle. However, now I was apprehensive. Was my grandfather still alive? And if he was, what did he think about my performance? Had I made my family proud? Was I doing enough to save our pack? Isolde's screams were one of the things I did remember during the time after the challenge. Not only had I beaten her, but her perfect hands had also turned into raw meat to match my own. The rage in her scream let me know she was still someone to keep close tabs on. She told me she wanted to exact revenge, and I didn't doubt her. The contest was down to me, Isolde, Minette, and l'Abbé. I did not fail to notice that my allies had been sent home while I was unconscious. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Willow, Justice, and even Sylvia were gone, and I was now outnumbered. It meant only one thing. I had to be ready to fight all of them. The limo door opening drew my attention to the figure sliding onto the leather seat beside me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. What are you doing here? He was dressed in an expensive suit, his hair slicked back and his face clean, shaven. He smelled of musky cologne that made me want to bury my nose in his neck. I had to give it to him. The man knew how to dress to impress. My heart and other parts of my body warmed at the sight of him. You didn't think he'd let you travel alone? He arched an eyebrow. I thought there would be cameras. I glanced out the window, looking for the crew that was always lurking around, hiding in dark corners with their all-seeing eyes. Caspian shook his head. This is a sensitive trip. We thought it was best to leave the cameras out of it. I regarded him, wondering if he had made this special arrangement for me himself. Either way, I was grateful. Thanks. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It's nice of you to come. I didn't think William would let me travel alone. He nodded, his smile dying. Speaking of William, the door opened again and Caspian's father figure slid into the vehicle. Oh. Hello, Elise. A bored look on his face. Where exactly are we headed? I thought they would send guards with me. This was unexpected. I glanced gratefully at Caspian. It would have been torture going with William alone. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. The mountains, I replied, still trying to get over the realization that they were coming to my house. They'll give you the address when we get closer. William narrowed his eyes, but didn't protest. He used his cane to pound on the divider between our sitting area and the driver's. The limo's engine gave a gentle purr, and we were off. The castle receded in the distance, and a host of strange emotions I couldn't understand swelled in my chest. What's your family like? Caspian said, clearly trying to keep the peace. My family? Well, I thought of how they might react to my chaperones. They'd never been fond of vampires, and now a group of them had kidnapped their kin and forced some shady arrangement on them. Would there be a fight? What would I do if that happened? Caspian watched me intently as I ruminated. So patient. It was a great quality in a partner. A partner. I was getting way ahead of myself. My family is like most shifter packs. Loud. Outdoorsy. Used to trusting and relying on each other. We're a small but loyal pack and ensure neighboring packs remain peaceful and fair to each other. Caspian nodded as if this had been something he was expecting. And your parents are Fenris and Aldo Pha Raven Moon. You do your research. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Wondering what Caspian would think of my passive father and my overbearing mother. And the Edric Alpha is your grandfather. Felix, yes. I cheers gruff and no nonsense. But if you press him and are honorable, he'll be loyal forever. Duly noted. I have an aunt and uncle. A few cousins who will be around the property. My cousin Lizzie will likely pepper you with a million questions. She's 8. The youngest. And babbied if you ask me. Lizzie, he repeated. Sounds lovely. I grinned. Well, see what you think after her 1,000,000 question. It'd been fidgeting with my jacket. And Caspian noticed. His hand slipped over to mine. How are they feeling? Your hands. I glanced at William, who rode silently on the other side of the enclosure. My hands were like this because of him. He was the one who designed the trial and made it so enticing I couldn't say no. He was the one who tortured me. And for what? To see if I was strong. He'd already proven that in the other trials. No, I had a feeling William liked watching us suffer. Or maybe just me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He probably revelled in the control he was exerting over us. They're fine. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Tucking my hands in my jacket pockets. Back to normal. Caspian frowned, but his quick glance at William let me know he was as aware of our chaperone as I was. After I gave the driver the address, it wasn't long before the limo was angling gines, and the thick forest inched closer to the road as we went. The smell of pine and forest long filled my senses. The deep shadows of the forest, cut into by the headlights, beckoned me home. When we reached the gate with our family crest on it, I knew I was home. The wolf's head with the words around it, Familiam I presos, Dio Ice, greeted me. Family above all else. Putting them first was all I had been trying to do since I'd last seen them. I hoped they knew that. We pulled through the gate and onto the long driveway. They must have been expecting us because the normally locked gate was thrown open. My pulse quickened, and my hands tightened into fists. Caspian peered out the window as our land crept by. The drive was lined with ancient trees that stretched into the night sky speckled with stars. Your forest is beautiful. I glanced at it, trying to see it as he was. For the first time, you should see it in the daytime. The words were out of my mouth before I'd realized what it said. He was a vampire. He couldn't see it in the daytime without some serious protection. Caspian didn't seem to mind, but William's cold stare turned arctic. She'd been far too silent for my tastes. Just what was happening in that steel trap he called a brain. If I hadn't been so desperate to see my grandfather, I might have passed up the chance just to keep William away from my family. As we pulled up to the circular drive in front of our home, I could barely contain myself. The large log cabin looked just as it had for decades, rough logs stacked on top of each other that stretched 3 stories into the night sky. The exterior lights clicked on as the front doors burst open. My family began to pour out of them. My mother ran out first, followed by my father in his paint-stained overalls. After them ran my Aunt Lyda, my cousin, Lizzie, and my uncle Rollo. Dolph and Remy had to be out in the woods, or maybe playing PlayStation at Eastmont with the sound turned up way too high. Damn, it was so good to be home. I didn't wait for the driver to get out and open my door. I didn't wait for anything. I yanked open the handle and threw myself out of the car. My mother shouted. I ran into her arms. Her long hair tickled my face as she pulled me close. More hands circled my back. Soon, I was wrapped in family. It's so good to see you guys. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Milburn, hearts out thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Tears I couldn't keep backtracking down my cheeks. My moon, I'm so happy to see you, my father said, his hand on my shoulder as if he were afraid I wasn't real. Alice, what was it like? My little cousin Lizzie asked, grabbing onto the hem of my jacket and wagging it up and down. How was it? It was you know what. Let's make sure we get to the introductions. Lizzie, I leaned down and pulled her into a proper hug. There's someone I want you all to meet. I turned to find Caspian and William standing in the driveway, looking pale in the moon. Caspian's human skin practically glowed. She'd taken the whole scene, and now he stood with a look of wonder on his face. William, for his part, had no discernible expression. I walked Lizzie up to the vampires and angled her toward Caspian. Lizzie, this is Caspian. This is Lizzie. Her eyes were as round as a full moon. Wow, are you that prince from TV? He kneeled down to be at her level. I'm not really a prince. You look like a prince. Her fist holding tight to my jacket. Thank you. He offered her a warm smile. And you must be a princess. He held out a hand, and she took it tentatively, giving it a little shake before grabbing onto me again. Lizzie, Caspian is a vampire. She nodded, still looking a little bit scared. I know. Do you drink red water? He gave a wry smile. Yes, did you drink Elise's red water? Okay, that's enough. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Milburn, hearts out thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Pulling her away and handing her back to my aunt. Mama, will you get some food and drink for the nightshades? We've been traveling. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. But Elise, your grandfather, I think you should see him right away. Her expression froze the red water in my veins. I could barely breathe. Why, she bit her lip. You'll see. Without another thought, I made a beeline to the house, up the main staircase, and down the hall to my grandfather's room. My heart pounded in my chest as I knocked on the wood door. Come. His voice a whisper. I opened the door. Grandfather. He was lying on the bed with the covers pulled up to his chest. The giant bed in the giant room made him look diminutive, and I hated that. Worse, the room had been rearranged since the last time he'd been in here. Human medical equipment stood unused in one corner. On the nightstand, many herbs and pill bottles had displaced the lamp and alarm clock. It seemed they'd tried everything to get him well and failed at that. What I could see of him above the covers appeared shrunken, as if someone had sucked the life out of him. He was half the man who'd accompanied me to Nightshade Barrow Castle. Had it only been a week, it looked like HUD been deteriorating for months. My heart broke. What was happening? How could he have gotten this sick so fast? I went to his bedside and fell to my knees. I didn't want the anguish to show on my face, but I feared I wasn't doing a good job at hiding how I felt. I'm so sorry it took me so long to get back. It was excuses died in my mouth. This wasn't about me. It was about him. How could he be this far gone? Reaching a frail hand out to take mine. I've had a good run. It's time for me to move on. Don't say that. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Choking back tears. You'll get better. I know it. He shook his head, wispy hair trailing across the pillow. Room-wide eyes strained to see me. My dove, don't fret. We've tried every remedy known to our kind. My time has come. Tears dribbled down my cheeks. There has to be a way. His hand squeezed mine. Don't fight it. It'll only make it harder. I've lived 25 decades. So much more than most. I've seen the pyramids. I've tasted the salty sea. I've held at Mother Moon more times than I can count. I've done it all. I shook my head. But I still need you. He patted my hand. And that is why I'm so glad you are here. Listen to me. We don't have a lot of time. I've been waiting for you. We need to talk. Okay. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Sniffling and hoping to talk about anything other than the fact that he was dying. I want you to have this. The trembling hand that was clasping mine came up out of the blankets. In it was his alpha necklace, the one he used to command the pack. Not only was it a symbol of leadership, but it meant that whoever wore it commanded our pack and those in our region who swore fealty to us. What? No. I shook my head and pushed his frail hand away. It should go to Dad. You know he doesn't want it. He coughed and fought to regain his breath for a moment. It has to go to you, he continued, pushing the necklace back at me, even though he was weak. This time his arm seemed to have more strength to it. Don't exert yourself. It couldn't be good for him. He gave me an annoyed look I was familiar with. I shook my head. I can't take the necklace. Grandfather. That's ridiculous. He was losing it. There was no way I should be in charge. I was only 19, not nearly old enough or wise enough to be the leader of our family and the packs around us. The sickness had gotten to him. It has to go to you. His voice suddenly serious. I felt the alpha tone echo in my head. He was commanding me to take it. I tried to fight it, but pain blossomed in my brain. Any wolf who tried to fight an alpha command must obey or risk madness. And was this really how I wanted to spend this borrowed time with him? No. You'd take it now, and we could figure out how to give it to my father later. I reached out for the necklace. Grandfather, can I go get Dad now? Take the necklace. Nodding. Now put it on. I slipped the chain over my head. It felt like slipping on an anchor. There was no way I was meant to wear this. He would come to his senses in a minute. Maybe I should get Mum. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Getting up, He gripped my hand to keep me in place at his bedside. Listen to me. You need to match with that nightshade boy. And you need to do it soon. Grandfather, Listen. But without the necklace, there was no outcome, and with it, it didn't matter. I stayed rooted to the spot. Okay, our very lives rest on you mating with Caspian Nightshade. I'm sorry to lay this on you, but you need to know that. You need to know what is at stake. Our lives. He nodded. William is a dangerous, cruel vampire. I've kept an eye on him for a long time, fearing his hunger for power. He's the monster you have to keep an eye on. You need to be close to learn his plans. The future of our kind may depend on it. My hands began to tremble. What he was saying sounded like the note we found in the library. If I didn't do what he said, would we die out? That couldn't be. Unless the prophecy was right now. This had to be my imagination convol using things. Still, I had to ask, Grandfather, do you know anything about the dark match? His cloudy eyes went wide. Where did you hear about that? And what do you know about it? He shook his head as another coughing fit took hold of him. He began to shake with coughs that rattled in his lungs. Wet phlegmy sounds that scared me. It was the same thing that was happening to our other shifter elders. Whatever was afflicting our people, it had reached my grandfather. I'll get you water. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylan Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Getting up to search the bedside tables, where I didn't find any. I turned back to tell him I was going to the kitchen, but the coughing had stopped. He was still as the grave. Trembling, I put my fingers to his neck, but there was no pulse. My grandfather was gone. Chapter 22. I couldn't believe it. My grandfather was dead. I tried to console myself with the fact that I'd been able to see him before his death. But the anger still came, filling my chest and threatening to drive me into a mad rage. If I hadn't been kidnapped, I would have been with him this whole week. I might have been able to help him, heal him, or find answers about the strange affliction that caused him to grow so ill, so fast. At least I wouldn't have had to hold his hand for only a few moments before losing him forever. My rage simmered inside me as we performed the howling ritual and buried his body in our woods. As was our custom, the fury burned as I comforted my family. It roiled as we howled at the moon in his honor. It was William's fault. And when I went downstairs to give my family the news that our alpha was gone, I couldn't even bring myself to look at the vampire for fear I would let my fury take hold and would lunge to rip his face off. Fortunately, he was called away moments after my grandfather's funeral and left with his driver, leaving Caspian with us. I counted myself and William lucky we went ride together all the way back to the castle. I couldn't guarantee his safety. Now my family and I sat in the kitchen, nursing cups of coffee and staring into space, while Caspian waited outside. Dad's eyes were red, rimmed and swollen, even though he hadn't shed any tears. I couldn't imagine how he was feeling. His father was gone, a father who always loved him and respected his mild, tender-hearted spirit, who didn't force him to become someone he was not. Grandfather gave me the alpha necklace. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylan Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Breaking the heavy silence. No one seemed surprised. They had expected it. What am I supposed to do with it? I'm too young. I don't even know how to use it. Mom reached across the table and patted my hand. Felix gave it to you for a reason. He knew your strength, your drive, your fair-minded spirit. He knew you would make a great leader and would do all that's necessary to protect the pack and keep the peace in our territory. Next to her, Dad nodded his agreement. From where I sat, I could see Lizzie dozing on the sofa in the next room. She had exhausted herself, crying, and collapsed as soon as the burying ritual was done. In her slumber, she appeared more vulnerable than normal, small and innocent. She needed protection and a peaceful place to grow and thrive. And yes, I would do anything to ensure she had that. Still, that didn't mean I had to be the Adric Alpha. I can still do all those things without I set the necklace on the table, wishing there was someone else who could take it. Someone else. How about a thorn? A wary voice asked inside my head. But how do I use it? Slowly becoming resigned to the fact I couldn't pass it along to anyone. Grandfather was supposed to pass that knowledge down before both Mum and Dad hung their heads. They had no answer for that. Your instincts will help, Mom said after a long moment. You have the natural strength to be a leader. An alpha. I have no doubt you'll find a way. Reluctantly, I slipped the necklace on, the chain heavy around my neck. Grandfather had left me without a choice, and I tried not to let resentment build. He hadn't had many choices either. I should go. I stood, walked out of the kitchen, and kissed Lizzie's forehead on my way out. A new limo had come for us. Luxury was but a phone call away for the nightshades. How nice. Caspian and I climbed in and got on our way, but it wasn't exactly the romantic ride I might have enjoyed. The anger I felt toward William had extended to Caspian. He hadn't exactly kept me prisoner, but he hadn't helped the situation either. How was I to know to what extent he was involved in the kidnapping and hostage-holding? He could be just as responsible as William for keeping me away from my grandfather. We rode in silence, the near darkness of the approaching dawn making it easy to hide the pained expressions that were likely apparent on my face. He seemed to know how upset I was. However, maybe from his vampire senses or just the fact that I picked the seat furthest to the back and stared out the window to avoid conversation, he let me ride in peace. At least I could be grateful for that. My hand found the alpha necklace now resting on my skin. It still hung like a lead weight, pulling me down with the strength of every shifter who was supposedly under my care. In a last-ditch effort, it turned around and asked my mother to take it from me, but she claimed they couldn't challenge my grandfather's final order as Edric Alpha. But just because HED left me in charge and my parents thought my instincts would guide me, it didn't mean I would be able to use the necklace's power. Responsibility without the ability to wield any of the power. What a great way to start off my day. It thought about not going back with Caspian, but then I was reminded of my grandfather's decree that I mate with Caspian no matter what. Grandfather had known about the dark match, and he seemed to give it credence. If I didn't go back, Caspian would be matched with Isolde, Nanette, or Labe. I couldn't let that happen, even if I was mad at him. I sighed deeply and pressed my forehead against the glass as the trees blurred past. It was nearly dawn. God, how I missed the sun. A knock on the glass made me lift my head. Caspian had rapped on the partition, and he waited until the driver slid the glass down. Can you pull over? We need a pit stop. My ears perked up. A pit stop? Whatever for? Sir, I don't think the driver started. But Caspian cut him off. Pull over. The command in his voice was undeniable. The driver complied, pulling the limo over on the side of the tree-lined road. The headlights sliced through the dark until they angled toward a line of trees and the road ahead. There was nothing but forest on either side. I glanced at Caspian with a confused expression on my face. Would you be so kind as to step outside for me? You'd like to get some fresh air. My brow furrowed further. You need fresh air. Roll down the window. He shook his head. I need that fresh air. The grey dawn light gave me just enough light to see by. He pointed at a clearing just beyond a line of trees. I started to ask more questions, or even protest, but something made me stop. Caspian didn't do silly or ridiculous things. He certainly didn't stop right before sunrise for a walk through the daisies for no reason. Nodding, I followed him out of the limo and off the beaten path. We walked quietly, both of us cutting through the wet grass without making a sound. At least we had that in common. If nothing else, we could move with stealth. When we were through the trees and standing in the field about 20 yards from the limo, he turned to me. Well, need to whisper. The driver is a vampire. Albeit a low-ranking one. He might still be able to hear us if we talked too loud. Achidi listened to our conversation. Caspian nodded. Achias, one of William's spies. Spies. My heart began to pound. William has a network of vampires working for him. It's one of the ways he controls those around him. Even if VG's not here, William is everywhere. Caspian gritted his teeth at the words. I reminded myself that Caspian might be as much a prisoner in all this as I was. He had insinuated as much before. Why would William want to spy on us? Feeling I already knew the answer, but wanting to hear it from him. Nonetheless, Caspian clasped his hands at his waist as if he was buying time to find the right words. Keep this between us. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I nodded. William wants to control everything. Every vamp. Every move. Even the shifters. That's part of why he set this all up. He can't have packs like yours interfering with his plan. And what's his plan? He wants to save our species. Which is noble, I guess, but his reasoning is not. He thinks if he can save us, he can rule not only our region but all vampires because he'll be regarded as a savior. My eyebrows shot up. He wants to be a vampire king. Caspian sighed. Essentially, yes. So, what does that mean for us? It means that if William thinks you're the best match for me, he'll approve of our match, if he doesn't him out. But I'm done playing his game. I raised an eyebrow. Are you? Caspian took a step forward and grabbed my hand. The movement was sudden. It caught me off guard and sent my heart pounding, my anger cracking. What can I do to show you I'm here for you? His dark eyes searching for mine. After the funeral, you wouldn't even look at me. I wanted to hold you. I wanted to. Tears welling in my eyes. I glanced up at him. You wanted to what? Anguish flooded his features. I wanted to take away all the pain you've ever felt and feel it for you. I wanted to erase anything that had ever hurt you. I wanted to kiss away your tears, but you wouldn't even look my way. Tears that had held back started to slide down my face. I cowed and looked at you. Can't you guess why? He nodded and was quiet for a beat. How you must hate me. I helped to keep you locked up. You missed the last days with your grandfather because of me. His head dipped. I stepped forward and gripped his chin. Not because of you. The last of my anger toward him dissolving and letting me see things cleared. Because of William. He hasn't given you a single choice since you got to the castle. Right. Caspian paused and then shook his head. Did he ever give you a choice? Even when he turned you into a vampire? Caspian, as jaw hardened. Then isn't your fault. I have to stop him. I can't let this go on. I caressed the cheek that rested against my palm. We can do it together. His arms slid around me and then we were kissing. His softness and longing made my legs weak. Not to mention my heart. Caspian was a prisoner too. We had a common enemy and needed to find a way to work together to secure both our freedoms. But not only for our sake. This was bigger than I had imagined, and there were many at risk. William's plans were terrifying. I had already seen the cruelty he was capable of. He needed to be stopped. And I had a feeling the answer to William's plan and the key to defeating him lay just within reach. And Caspian and I could find it together. Our kiss deepened. I was in mourning, but I also craved his closeness. Something solid to cling to in these tumultuous times. Without thinking and seeking only to feel something good, I pulled him down into the soft grass. It was damp with pre-dawn dew, but all my attention was on Caspian, on his body and how every inch seemed carved out of marble, sculpted into the finest male specimen I'd ever laid my eyes on. We lay side by side, gazing into each other's eyes. I pulled his shirt apart and slid my hands over his chest. Smooth taut muscles dipped and rose beneath my fingertips. One of his hands caressing its way down my hip. Elise, you drive me crazy. A good type of crazy. The best. Then he leaned forward and licked my lips apart. Soon. And his deft fingers were coaxing tingles out of me I didn't even know were possible. What about the driver? I breathed into the hollow of his neck. Will he come looking for us? He shook his head. He knows to stay in the car until we come back or face my wrath. Then what about the sunrise? noting the grey light of dawn all around us. Caspian brushed an errant strand of hair from my face. Elise, at this moment, I burn for you more than 1,000 sunrises. His hand went under my shirt, but it stayed at the edge of my bra. There was a question in his gaze, and a nod from me gave him permission. When he cupped one of my breasts, delicious heat exploded between my legs, causing my back to arch. I clung to him, reveling in the raw sweetness of his touch. Caspian reached down, grasped the edge of my shirt, and pulled it over my head. His eyes raked over me with hunger, making me want him even more. He removed his shirt next and, along with mine, blanketed it over the ground. I sucked in a breath, admiring the perfection of his body from his round pecs to the hard lines of his 8-pack to his perfect V. But before I could get a good look, he lifted me as if I weighed nothing. He moved me to lay on top of our shirts, unbuttoning my pants. I pulled them off with Caspian's help. He did the same until he lay next to me in tight boxer briefs. I shivered with anticipation. It pictured this for so long. No matter how many times it tried to deny it, it wanted nothing more than to claim Caspian Nightshade as my own. With practiced hands, I removed my bra. His eyes went dark and his fangs elongated over his lower lip. I had the power to drive him crazy, and it felt good. Taking him by surprise, I grabbed his shoulders, pushed him down, and crawled on top of him. He hissed in a breath as I slithered up his body, brushing my torso against his. Down. Elise, he groaned, his eyelashes fluttering. What you do to me? When I reached the top, I sucked his bottom lip, tasting him. His tongue slipped into my mouth just as his hardness grew beneath me, and his hands cupped my breasts. His core touched on my bare skin. Me built inside of me like a bubbling well of desire. I wanted Caspian so badly, like I never wanted anyone or anything before. One of his hands traveled downward and slipped under my panties. His fingers parted me and glided over my most sensitive spot. Pleasure lit up my brain as I closed my eyes and sucked in a breath. Do you want me? He asked in a raspy voice that sent goosebumps trickling over my arms. Yes, I said in a hot breath. Say it. I want you. One of his fingers slipped inside of me, and I groaned in satisfaction, my eyes fluttering of their own accord. He lifted his head and took my nipple inside his mouth and sucked. The sweet agony was killing me. Unable to help myself, I reached down, took him in my hand, and began stroking. Elise, he groaned. He moved in a blur, and the next thing I knew, I was under him. I gasped, then let out a pleasure, heavy moan. When I glanced down, I realized his underwear was gone. Ichidi removed it so quickly that I hadn't even noticed. He lowered his head to kiss my breasts, my stomach, the edge of my hips, then parted me to give one slow lick between my legs. I threaded my fingers in his silky hair, and I felt myself teetering over the edge of pure ecstasy. Every inch of my body trembled with need. Slowly, he kissed his way back up, and then he was pressed against my core. Are you sure? I gave a single nod without hesitation. This moment could have been predicted the night I saw him for the first time standing on that balcony. With one thrust, he was inside of me. I cried out my pleasure as he moved deeper, and he was all I could feel. The rest of the world disappeared as we moved in tandem, kissing and caressing each other. Lost in the heady moment, release found me at the same time that it did him. My body shuddered as well as my heart, and I knew I was forever lost to him. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the story, please give it a like. And don't forget to subscribe to get notifications for updates.